So one of the first things that I did here, just to do a kind of a test, I bought these spacers right here that you're going to need for the car. I mean, your car's going to have some on there already, so I just figured I might as well buy new ones if I'm going to be chopping them up. So I took a multi-tool and I cut this lip off. You can see here. It needs to be nice and flat. With the new bump stops, it doesn't have the indentations that the original bump stops do if you were to buy them from GM, so that it just mounts right up around that lip there. So these are flat on the bottom, so now I'll just be able to mount it just like that. And I bought these for $5, and I'll put the links for everything that I bought. I bought these off of Summit for, they were like less than $6 a piece. If you get them from GM or some OEM bump stops, it's going to cost you about $50 a piece, which to me is ridiculous. So you can see that this one's kind of ovaled out. This hole on the right, the one on the left is perfect. But if you place it on there, they line up perfectly. So you'll be able to use the bolts, the factory bolts, and run that through into the frame, the bottom of the vehicle. So I'm going to jack the car up, remove that rear tire, show you where that bump stop location is at. So there's the bump stop. In some previous videos I showed where I was shaving it down, so you can see where it makes contact. You can see it's hitting pretty hard because if polyurethane is scraping off paint, that's pretty bad. Because I have a lowering kit on this. You see a Coney shock with UMI springs. Now these springs aren't as thick as the factory springs, which I wish they were, because they would probably take bumps a little bit better. But so I'm going to end up removing this. I ended up using some aftermarket bolts, but with the kit that I got, you can see how far down it is because that lip is there. So that's the lip that I ended up shaving off. So I got some factory bolts that came, well, factory style bolts that came with that kit that I bought for those spacers. Wasn't too hard, got that new one in, so you can see, because I had the old hardware on this one, I didn't cut that lip off, so it wasn't flush. So I got that lip. And this thing actually hung down lower than it was supposed to, so that was less travel for the axle. So the suspension was not allowed to do its job properly. And if you line it up, it almost hangs at the same spot now. Because if you think about it, when that bump, the polyurethane bump stop was at full length before I shaved it down, it hung down lower than that. So it'd probably been like right about there. So because now you see it's more flush. So if I was to line it up how it was originally with all that extra hardware, you can see that it almost hangs down as far as the rubber bump stop, even though, yeah, I did shave it. So how I cut this was, I've actually got the battery charging right now. Use my little multi-cutting tool here. And I even use these, the ones that say wood on it for these blades. And it cut through, believe it or not. The other one got chewed up, so this is another one I got. So just kind of keep it leveled and straight and just go ahead and cut that lip off, and that's how I remove that other one. So I'm going to end up removing this whole thing just with that, or you could use a hacksaw. The thing about a hacksaw is you're really going to have to put in some muscle, and it's not quite as effective from what I was trying, because I was also trying the hacksaw even after I started it with the multi-tool, because the battery started going a little dull there. So I ended up taking a hacksaw and trying to do it that way, but maybe because the blades on this aren't too sharp, I could replace it. And I'm going to go ahead and start off with that multi-tool first, just to get things going. And this is actually the first blade I use. You see there's a nice little flat spot there. But this right here, this blade, see this has wood. This blade came from Walmart. A little cheap hyper tough set. But for it to actually cut through the first one, more than impressive. And that blade completely broke. Interesting. Clean cut too. Weak point. Alright, so I got it in. Problem was one of the bolts that came with the kit snapped on me. I guess using these bolts here over time and how much the suspension was slamming on the other bump stops, it just caused it to kind of, the fitting on the inside kind of bent, I guess. But you can see how bad it was. You can see that this thing is bowed in. You can see how hard it's slammed. That whole top metal piece is just bowed. Terrible. But that's it. I mean, it's not much to it. I mean, if you're replacing rubber with rubber, you probably wouldn't have that same issue because you probably wouldn't slam as hard. Definitely wouldn't slam as hard if you had a car that's not lowered. You have the factory suspension on it, or an aftermarket suspension that was still at normal ride height from factory.